Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on wherever you're joining from. Welcome to part one of the two-part webinar series, which aims to unravel the potential of generative AI in pharmacovigilance. Today's topic is, we will delve into the practical use cases, pitfalls, and considerations for real-world application of generative AI in PV. And the next one, which will be, I think on July 20th, we'll talk about trust mechanisms and cost considerations when deploying generative AI, especially in PV's area. Our aim with this webinar is to discuss and inform leaders such as yourselves on the applicability of generative AI in PV. We'll try to separate the hype from the reality, bring you some learnings and experiences that we've had, and we will also do some demos to bring it to life so that you get a sense of how this can actually work. But before I jump into it, let's do a quick round of introductions. I'm your moderator for the day, and I lead the safety business at Indegene. And with me are my esteemed panelists. I have Tarun Mathur, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Indegene. Tarun has been operating at the cutting edge of technology for the last couple of decades, and his work primarily involves contextualizing technology to the life sciences domain. We have Dr. Shubha Rao, also from Indegene, who heads the global PV operations. She's been a practitioner, a PV veteran for, again, close to a couple of decades. And she'll bring in some of the operational aspects to how the entire element of generative AI can be implemented in PV. And finally, we have Sandeep, who's the head of the Microsoft Technology Center. He's a passionate techie, technology thought leader, an evangelist, and a generative AI expert. Sandeep will bring the outside perspective, what's happening, what are some of the, what the industry is doing. So with that, let's jump in. Before we begin, we'd also like to let you know that please feel free to keep adding your questions in the Q&A box. We will take all the questions towards the end. The last 10 minutes we will reserve for that. We'd love to see as many questions as possible. So, Sandeep, let me start with you. Microsoft has been at the forefront of this generative AI revolution with your, given your partnership with OpenAI. From your vantage point, how do you see the last 6 months since the launch of ChatGPT in November? How has our world changed, and what can we expect to see going forward as well?
Nikesh, first of all, thank you so much for hosting me, and good evening, everyone. One word, Nikesh, historic, right? No less than an iPhone moment or a calculator moment. In fact, last 6 months, I've been pretty much, to be really frank, landing 2 strategy briefings on the topic of Gen AI every single day, right? The best part of my job is I get to host a couple of customers every single day. So what I want to share is the ground reality, right? Trust me on this one, the innovation is real, it is here, right? With healthcare, retail, manufacturing, BFSI, education, across the board, we're seeing significant momentum in the country, globally for sure, but I can only reflect on India business because I get to meet those customers. And it is a boardroom conversation, Nikesh. Unlike other technologies that has emerged so far, this is absolutely a boardroom conversation. That means it has garnered so much of attention globally. And it's almost like if you're not there, you're probably missing a huge, being part of a huge momentum on a wave, right? So, in fact, as Microsoft, we went generally available with our services in the month of Jan, and it almost feels like every single week in the last 6 months we've announced something or other, right? As a company, we believe in the design thinking called Copilot. That means the generative AI is absolutely driven by human in the loop, and we as humans decide how do we best use this depending on the business and context, right? Be as simple as, for example, today when people use ChatGPT, we use it like a digital companion, right? We go and use it like a co-pilot, right? So as a company, be it Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams, there is Copilot coming in. In fact, yesterday was historic, Nikesh, because as Microsoft, we announced Azure Quantum Elements, right? Again, looking at how generative AI can help scientists, progress their research when it comes to, either actual chemical and material science through HPC and, of course, generative AI. The need for us to, I would say, the reality check is, a lot of times when it comes to innovation, we always see, 1 or 2 years of, warm-up time. But I don't think that's true with this innovation. It is here and now, and every single business is either experimenting, ideating, or in the construction phase. Few customers have gone live with innovation, but it is here and now, and it is real.
Fantastic. Thanks. That's a great opening, Sandeep. Before we go forward, I'd actually like to invite the audience to a poll. So audience, you will see a poll popping up on your screen. We would like to understand your familiarity with generative AI. So please go ahead and click on the most appropriate option. So while that's going on, Tarun, let me ask you this. Indegene has been, one of the early adopters of generative AI in the life sciences domain. You have been in conversations with various leaders across the life sciences organizations. From your conversations with them, what does generative AI mean for pharma organizations?
Yeah, so pharma organizations, I echo what Sandeep is saying. They're definitely excited. They see the art of possible. And we also see that FOMO aspect, right? The fear of missing out is certainly there. At the same time, especially healthcare, we tend to be fairly cautious and controlled in adoption of technology. So especially in the early stages, there was a lot of sensitivity or issues around where are we at with data privacy and security? Are these eligible, if we're going to deal with PHI, for example, are these eligible to deal with that kind of environment? But what the organizations have been doing is working with the large tech partners, Microsoft being a prime example, and the prime player in that space, to say, let's set up a secure environment. Let's set up an infrastructure so that we can run these experiments and pilots securely. And they're seeing the same opportunities that we're seeing in other industries. So opportunities for efficiency gain, opportunities for augmentation versus replacement has been the big theme lately. And we're seeing all of the partners and clients that we work with look at it from that lens. But I completely echo what Sandeep is saying, that this is an inflection point in tech history. It's laptop to tablet, it's on-prem to cloud. Now we're seeing a generative AI revolution.
Okay, excellent. So I'm seeing the results of the poll, and it seems almost like a bell curve. I think almost everyone has started experimenting with it, started playing around with it. What is heartening to see is that some of you folks have started experimenting with it even at your organizations. So that's a great segue to Dr. Shubha. Dr. Shubha, you've been a veteran in the PV space, working in the domain for 17, 18 years now. Given that PV is highly regulated, quality and compliance, patient safety are top priorities, where do you see the role of technologies such as Gen AI in this space?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question, Nikesh. I know many of us here in the call are from PV industry, and I think most of us are aware that in the PV domain, I would say the tasks within the case management, aggregate report, risk signal are usually manual still. I know there are technologies that have come, but still I think it is on the manual side. And what we are seeing is increasing, volume of adverse events, the complexity related to that. And I think PV organization currently is struggling to ensure, quality compliance and to be cost effective. and also to generate insight real time, so that they can keep an eye on the safety profile of the product, weed out noise from the data that is coming through every day. I think that is the current challenge that PV organization is seeing currently. And with the experiments that we've done, I think the generative AI could solve some of these problems, right? I know probably we still have to go a little longer to bring it to reality, but then at least the experiments are promising. And with whatever we have done, at least I know we have looked at some of the areas that could impact within the PV industry itself. And I'm just going to share a few of the use cases right with generative AI. So as I mentioned, generative AI can accelerate time to insight and help making decisions in PV real time to enhance patient safety. The key functionality of generative AI that could be relevant to PV industry is one is entity extraction from unstructured data, patterns and insights from multi-source data, and then generate content adhering to the required style guide. So the 6 use cases that we can see, one is AE identification from multiple sources such as chat transcripts, literature, or patient support programs, and so on. Then looking at unstructured text and convert it into structured information, such as from literature cases. Then provide real-time contextual intelligence, and this would assist medical reviewer with data from label, right? For example, listedness. It's not as simple that I go and look at certain section label and take a decision. We'll have to be able to make that intelligent call, and that is something that we feel generative AI can impact. And then look at data patterns, so support in aggregate analysis and insights. Ability to generate evidence from multiple sources, that is in signal evaluation, and then data to content in aggregate report authoring. I can actually provide 2 examples, 2 use cases from here, and then we'll be able to probably better appreciate how generative AI can play a role. So the first example is on the extraction of information from unstructured text, such as case narrative. It could be literature article, it could be narrative sections within SEOMs or MedWatch form, and then convert that into the structured field, right? I know there are several automations that are already there, probably have addressed the structured to structured conversion, right? That if you have XML to XML, or even in the SEOMs form, there are structured fields that can be kind of mapped using rule-based engine, right? And I am able to generate the output. But then I think the challenge that we, so far we've been trying to address is, how do I take information from unstructured content that is there in the SEOMs form? So for example, in this is a case narrative that would probably come in SEOMs or MedWatch, right? So the current model, though we are able to extract entity, that means it is able to extract indications and then medical histories and adverse events and so on. But then what happens is that there is no contextual extraction. That means an indication could be an adverse event in another scenario, right? So that understanding the current models is unable to probably relate to. So in here, what you can see here, if medical history has been mentioned here directly, then there are models that can extract this information directly, right? Saying it is medical history, then it will get into medical history column. But then we don't get to see information written that way, right? That in here you can see here the patient was taking this product has been, of course, masked to maintain confidentiality. So there is some product been named, and there are some conditions been named here, right? So this is a medical history. But then the current model won't be able to extract this accurately. But what we have seen, using generative AI, that is GPT, is that it is able to actually identify this to be a medical history. So I can just run you through, this demo. The same, the case that I showed just now is the input data here, and you can see that it has been extracted again. There are several steps that have gone behind the scene to arrive at this output, right? The output that I'm looking at is a JSON format. This format, the JSON file can now get into safety database to auto-populate in certain field. And some of these elements are E2B elements. We've mapped E2B elements. But then from this unstructured content, we have trained the model, we have given certain instructions, we have given certain samples for it to, give this output that we are looking at. And that specific example that I showed about, medical history is in here. I'm going to pause here, and you will see here the medical history. It was not explicitly mentioned in the narrative, but the model is able to understand that it is medical history and then extract this information, and this will go sit in the database separately. And also, there were certain date information, there were certain time that was mentioned in the case narrative that I showed before. So if I don't understand the context, I think it was actually talking about the time period. It was happening, all the events were happening in that particular day, right? Then, but this model is able to understand that it is on the same day, different time, that these, occurrence are happening, and it's able to identify and give you that start and end time. So that is something that we have experimented, and we feel that it is giving good accurate result with this kind of use case. So this was one of the example. So I'll go into the next example, which is on the auto-authoring a section of an aggregate report. It could be any document, of course, but in here we are looking at aggregate report. And the actual use case that we are looking at is line listing, which is more structured, I should say, to creating an unstructured content, right? Unlike the previous example that we saw, it was from unstructured content, we wanted to get structured information. In here, it is from structured to getting into a free text field. So generally, a few sections within the aggregate report, we would need to take information from the safety database, that is all the line listings relevant to a particular reporting period, about adverse events and so on, right? And then we provide narration of or aggregate analysis of that particular information. So that is the second use case. And again, as you can see here, so this is the line listing. Of course, right now it can't take the line listing as is. So we have to do some data massaging to ensure, we are able to take this into GPT and for it to read the information accurately. And again, there were certain instructions given about, what does each column mean? How should each column be read? And then how to actually give you that aggregate analysis, right? So those are the instructions, or what we call it as prompt in, I would say, in GPT language. So those have been given. And again, for coming to this output, there are several steps that are happening behind the scene, which you don't see it here. But as a medical writer, for example, I'm just going to see that I have given an input, and then I'm going to get an output, which I just have to review. So this is, a line listing for certain reporting period, for example. I've given it here, and I could have hundreds of line listings that has been fed into this particular platform. And you don't see all of them here, of course, for the demo purpose. So of all the line listing that I've given, it is able to identify that 12 of them belong to this reporting period. That is what you see here. Sorry. So, you see that the 12 of them belong to this reporting period. I'm just going to pause here. And then it is giving me that analysis of how many of them are serious, non-serious, and how many involved, which gender and so on. And then it is also giving me outcome of the cases, how many were fatal, resolved, so on. And also how many, what are the most common adverse events, right, with the number. So one is it's listing me, or it's providing me information on the adverse event. Hallucination, for example, is 2, insomnia is 2, so on. And then finally, out of the 4 fatal cases that it has seen, then how many had medical history of seizures, and then it is giving me case information as well. Of course, this, what I need as an output, can also be, kind of given as an instruction. This could be for specific, client requirement. A specific MHA might follow this pattern. Another MHA might have different way of, looking at the line listing data, but that is something that can be given to the model for it to give you the output that we want, right? But the objective here is to show that from the line listing that it is, I'm giving a data dump and I've given instruction as to how to read that line listing and provide the outcome that I'm looking at, right? So this was another experiment that we have done, and with a little bit fine tuning and so on, we are able to get to the output that nearly matches as would a writer would write. So now the writer role becomes that I review this, that information is accurate, and then I just have to move on to the next work. So this is the second example.
Thank you, Dr. Shubha. That was really insightful. And I know we've shown only a couple of cases, but there are many, many more that we could look at. While it opens up a bunch of possibilities, I'm sure there are some concerns as well that are surrounding generative AI. Again, before we continue, we're going to ask the audience another poll to identify some of the top concerns that you might have. So again, you'll see a poll that will flash on your screen. So please, as earlier, choose the option that you feel defines the concern that you have the most. Sandeep, coming back to you. So while we get the results of the poll, what has been your experience working with life sciences companies specifically on Gen AI, and what according to you, are you seeing as the future holding for life sciences companies?
Thanks, Nikesh. In fact, Shubha, that was a fabulous demo. I love seeing the magic of GPT on data. Now, here's the thing, right? So when Shubha was demonstrating, I think one thing we realized that it's not a information extraction, it's a reasoning engine, right? You can reason with information and you can have a conversation on your data, right? Look at it this way: in life sciences, pharma, it doesn't matter, across industry. If a researcher is working with massive corpus of data, this way of looking at data with GPT enhances research productivity, right? Through automated workflows. Again, I mentioned Copilot earlier. In fact, what Shubha was showing was pretty much she dealing with GPT as a Copilot and looking at unearthing insights from the data, right? So on that trail, if you look at it, take any industry, life sciences specifically, there is massive corpus of data. Research is happening. Can we progress science by way of offering Copilot as a digital companion for researchers so that they can reason with data? I think reasoning with data is something which never happened so far. We always look at technology to extract information and then apply human brain to reason with it, right? That's at times humanly impossible because number of attributes that you deal with is practically impossible for human beings to assimilate information. That's where this reasoning brain, I use the term reasoning brain, this brain comes into action for you. I think the big deal here is grounding this brain on the facts that we have, right? Because this brain is pre-trained, and it has world's knowledge, but the knowledge may be faulty, right? It may not be accurate, but we as a company, let's say you as Indigene, you have the factual data. So I will bring that data for the model to see and respond to me. By the way, I'm just saying see and respond. I'm not saying feed, because these models, large language models, are highly trained. So it needs to know for the data for it to become a lot more accurate. So I think you have to bring the facts, use the engine as a reasoning brain. And I think life sciences, pharma, etc., is a huge benefit in terms of having a Copilot, which probably should have been there for some time now, but you have a true conversation agent to unearth insights which otherwise those stories were hidden. This technology will help us unearth insights.
Super. Thanks so much, Sandeep, for providing that perspective. So we have the results of the poll, and I think not surprisingly, I think a couple of the top concerns, right? One is really, can I trust generative AI to generate accurate outputs consistently? Right? It might do it once, it might do it twice, but can it do it consistently? Data privacy and security is the other key concern. The good part is that very few of you feel that it will actually be applicable to your process. and which is good news from an applicability perspective. So, why don't we go into that? Tarun, I mean, all of these are valid concerns, right? Why don't you talk about how does one ensure the accuracy of outputs? We're also seeing some questions filtering through in the Q&A, and audience keep adding the questions. We will take it as it comes, and towards the end as well. But yeah, Tarun, how does one ensure accuracy of output?
Yeah, and I can certainly speak to our experience in addressing that concern. Folks who are comfortable or have been using things like ChatGPT for a while can see it can give creative responses. So this concept of they call it hallucinations, right, where data is invented, and even though it wasn't really part of the context, that comes out there. So there's a number of things that come related to this. One is there is an art to this thing we call prompt engineering, right? How you write the questions makes a huge difference in the nature of the material you get back. So many of us who are subject matter experts actually have to become teachers again in some sense, that the language of communication is very important. Then, and as Sandeep was saying, this being able to expose your data properly into the model, right? So there are different techniques for how you add this context to your query to these models, and that kind of you can call it, people call it few shot learning, right, or training. If you're able to do that and you can fit that into your prompt, you can then refine and get better results. But from a pilot perspective, one thing we've been spending time on is actually setting up the equivalent of unit tests. So in software engineering, when you write a function, you create unit tests to go and see, does that function behave the way we want to? It's the same process here. And matter of fact, that tool that Shiba was demonstrating has that allows our subject matter experts to do exactly that. They'll write quite a variety of different tests and examples, and then compare the results and see if they're consistent. So being able to have a development process to vet your prompts, that is a key piece of it, and the right technology underneath there. So beyond just the GPT engine, but there are things such as vector databases and the tools or plugins to connect to sources of truth that may not be pre-trained into the model, right? Having that right tooling and infrastructure underneath there is also a critical piece of it. But we are struggling today. I mean, the explainability, how do you address or identify biases in the core training data? Those things have to be tackled. And we're seeing different methods of addressing it. One is having the right type of fine-tuning and training and unit tests, as I described. Another one is we're seeing a growing proliferation of specialized models. So there are versions of these large language models that are specifically tailored for healthcare, for example. And in those cases, the expectation and what we're seeing is that the transparency around what was used to train the system is greater. So the auditability and explainability, you would know if it's processing clinical trial data based upon its own knowledge, if there was a racial bias, for example, or socioeconomic bias in there. Those have to be called out so you know how to tune your example. So there are a variety of tactics to address this, and we're also seeing those tactics being implemented both by our client partners within the organization using their knowledge and expertise, along with the large tech organizations, Microsoft kind of leading the way there and showing that this is how we can set up the environments and address those concerns.
Thank you, Tarun. And for the other questions, Sandeep, I'm going to turn to you, right? Valid concerns around data security, data privacy, right? How does one ensure that, Sandeep? What is Microsoft doing in that area?
Absolutely. So before that, Nikesh, I just want to add one point. I think Tarun made a great point of, few shot learning. Dominantly, we go with zero shot. That means, we believe in the intelligence of the brain, but we try to bring our facts. But of course, at times, you also need to educate the model, saying, while you answer my question, keep this in mind so that it's a lot more, it's aligned to your responses. But see, let's be very clear. This is a 6-month-old baby, right? This has not been there for 6 years. It's a 6-month-old baby, and it's only going to get better from here on. Of course, if you look at GPT 3.5, we witnessed, at times it used to hallucinate. That means, error with confidence, right? Now, GPT-4 is a lot more human aligned. I've not come across situations. I've been playing with these models pretty much every single day for the last 6 months. GPT-4 is the least, I would say, it's the most factually right model ever built so far. That means you show the facts, it will not deviate from that while responding. If it deviates, it hallucinates. But as Microsoft, OpenAI, by the way, if you look at it, by default, they do content moderation, right? I mean, they put guardrails. In addition to that, as Microsoft, we actually bring in additional responsible AI ensemble models behind the scenes. For every question being asked of these models, it goes through content moderation, content filtering, right? For example, if I ask a question saying, hey, I have a case here of a patient, right, in healthcare. Should I administer this medicine? Yes or no? I mean, these are large language models. They're not expected to say yes or no. They're expected to give you reasons why you should do what you should do. But end of the decision is left to the end user, right, as a doctor. Right. So I would say when it comes to every question, which is called the prompt, every response called the completion goes through responsible AI ensemble model to ensure the response does not harm anybody. The question that they're asking is not in a negative context. I think that's a foundation on which we are operating as Microsoft. When I say these models are available as first-class citizens on Azure OpenAI service, that means the foundation is responsible AI design principles. As Microsoft, we've been investing in that area for the last 7 to 8 years. Thankfully, all the staff has come to our, I would say, benefit in putting out the foundation. It's not a one-time thing, Nikesh. It has to happen relentlessly because as people use it, there are more use cases coming in, and we have to relentlessly look at how do we ensure we put guardrails. This is, in my view, the future is how can we make these models to be a lot more human aligned. That way, it is aligned to what society expects that this model does, right? And I want to make one last statement. This is a 6-month-old baby. This is not accurate. This is not right yet. No, we have to look at techniques. For example, few shot learning or worst case scenario, you know what, I want to fine tune the model. So those decisions, what you take as you move along. But the point is, look at the reasoning engine, right? And when it's a reasoning engine, it will give you the wrong answer. You're there to, hey, you know what, this is wrong, right? Model will say, by the way, my source says, what have I said? Can you tell me the source? It will tell you. By the way, recently announced Azure Health Bot, right? Which it was a bot framework earlier. Now we're basically embellishing Azure Health Bot with generative AI. So you ask what is CABG, it'll explain, and I'll say, by the way, where to get the source? It will give you the source also. So Tarun mentioned explainability. I need to know where this information was given to you and why you're responding this way. So that model explainability, transparency is critical. That's the future.
Okay. Thank you for your insights, Sandeep. So I think we are coming close to the Q&A segment, but I'd just like to take a question around. So how does one get started, right, in this journey? Tarun, what would your advice be to our audience who might want to start experimenting with generative AI?
Yeah, so particularly in the PV team working within the enterprise, I would definitely suggest you work closely with your IT team and your compliance team to set up the right infrastructure in place, right? Because as you mentioned, and Sandeep has mentioned also a couple of times, the 6-month-old baby, you want to make sure that you're setting up your tool and your environment correctly in a compliant way, so you don't, obviously face the wrath later on. So work with the IT team to set up the right tools in place. Then once you have that, the next step is how do you construct the pilots? So there's no shortage of ideas here. So going through that innovation processing, let's set up these experiments. This is a great example of a technology that is heavily tilted towards subject matter expertise. So that's actually a great opportunity. Probably one of the biggest wins here is that now your subject matter experts are becoming your engineers in some ways. So allowing them to actually experiment in a right subject matter friendly type of a tool, right? They shouldn't be writing Python. What they should be writing is English. And so having the right tool, Microsoft has a studio tool, and there's other open source and commercial ones available to help with that. And learning the art of prompt engineering, learning the art of how to integrate plugins and with your enterprise data. Those have been made much more straightforward with the right tooling in place so that you don't have to have large engineering teams supporting subject matter experts. You could run these experiments and pilots. I would suggest thinking through how you test your pilots. So having a right framework in place around these are the pass-fail conditions across a wide variety and diversity of cases, for example, is important. And then finally, it's end of the day, this exercise isn't just about using cool technology. It's about realizing business benefits. So we're looking for tangible, measurable outcomes at the business level. So those KPIs today, they're mostly centered around efficiencies type of gains and significant efficiency gains. By the way, this is not a small incremental change. This is a significant double-digit gain. So having those KPIs and a mechanism to measure them, and in our point of view, and what we've seen in PV specifically, is there's a large opportunity for process re-engineering. So the actual way that we process cases, that whole QCMR workflow and some of the ways we've done things traditionally, it's, you can actually take this opportunity to rethink that. Given this augmentation, can we now rethink the processes and realize those business gains? And I think this is a huge opportunity for all functions. I think PV is one of the biggest beneficiaries here, especially due to the legacy way of working with case processing in particular.
Sure, and that's a great segue to the question I was going to ask Dr. Shubha. And I think there are some questions around that in the Q&A as well. Is with all this, what is the role of the domain SME, right? I mean, how do they see themselves in this, or how should they see themselves? How should they evolve in this journey?
Yeah, I think partly Sandeep and Tarun also touched about it. More and more, I would see SME role a change a bit in terms of one is understanding how LLM or GPT works, right? And then because this is going to be there, you want it or not, I think things will be different from how things are working now. So that means the SMEs have to catch up on what technology can do for them, understand how they work, and then I think at least in generative AI and with several experiments that we are doing, right, the SMEs become the instructors. That we are instructing the model as to what output that I want based on input that I'm giving. So that bit of, I think, change in the mindset has to happen. And once we reach to the productionalizing this, I guess the role would be more of reviewers. Maybe we probably will not have, data entry or the writer kind of role. It could be more of actually looking at the data, right? Actually making that decisions, bringing the human intelligence where needed. I think the team, I think the SMEs have to upskill themselves to understand how this, all these GPTs would change the way that current process is working.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's move to the Q&A now. There are some really interesting questions around this. I think some of them have been answered in terms of safety, security, right? But maybe we double click on 2-3 themes that are emerging. One is, about GPT not being perfect and prone to errors. How would you follow up to ensure that whatever is the output is accurate? And Tarun, do you want to talk a little bit about that as to how can we ensure that, or how can we sure that it's generating the right output?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that have emerged. One is, and it's why we say this is augmentation versus replacement, right? End of the day, especially in healthcare and life sciences, there still needs to be a human accountable for decisions being made, right? And when we've seen actually guidance from in the US, the FDA, for example, you can't have ChatGPT listed as author for a submission, right? There has to be a human attached to it. So this human in the loop process or human augmentation, how you design that workflow in a way that doesn't negate the benefits of efficiency of automation, right? I think that's the big win here. And so having that ability to triage that these responses are more likely to need human review versus ones that are most probably the high 90% confidence that it's fine, and then how you route those. I think that's an opportunity to address this concern. We're also seeing there's some interesting technical approaches to this. So you can have content or data generated from this reasoning engine. You can have completely independent models who are trained to audit that, basically to give you back feedback whether this is something that doesn't make sense or not. And we've seen some really brilliant examples of that, where you basically have an actor and a critic, if you will, right? And based upon the critic's response, then that determines the next steps in the workflow. But I think finally, end of the day, it's workflow modification, human in the loop type of a approach currently.
Sure, thanks. Sandeep, maybe I'll ask you to take this question. Are there other generative AI models which are as, I think the question is, as famous as ChatGPT, but in general as popular or as effective as ChatGPT?
So here is what happened, right? AI is not new, it's been there for decades. Now, why everybody caught on this momentum is simply because somebody gave UI to AI via ChatGPT, right? Otherwise, none of us would have realized the true benefits, true potential of generative AI. Now, of course, right now, if there's a groundbreaking innovation, which we are witnessing every day, that is a ChatGPT, which is a research preview, by the way. If you look at ChatGPT, it's not a production application. It's an application built on LLMs to show the world the true power of generative AI. That was the intent. Something else happened, by the way, after that. The intent was to educate people on the true power. No, see, it's not going to be a singularity. There'll be a lot more other models coming in, and it is good if it happens that way, because that way there is always a healthy competition to make sure that we make it better, human learning, etc. So far, right now, looking at what we've written in the last 6 to 8 months, there is nothing that has come close to ChatGPT, because we've witnessed. See, it's not the question of who did it. The question is, there is an application which showed the true promise of AI, which we always have been looking forward for, right? And on that note, yes, ChatGPT is historic in its existence. Got to 100 million users in probably 60 days, which took 4.5 years for Facebook to get there. Right, never happened in the history of digital landscape. So it is one of its. Hence, we always say, hey, this is a iPhone moment, a calculator moment. In fact, Senate in the US Congress said it's a printing press moment, right? So that's what we have today. So nothing else is close to what we witnessed so far.
Okay. One really interesting question, that is, isn't prompt engineering possibly just another way of introducing individual bias? Right? Because it's a great question. Any thoughts on that, Tarun?
I mean, there's definitely it is a channel, right? A pathway that, depending on how you do your prompting, you can introduce biases and other types of containment or contaminants into your results, right? So when we say the word prompt engineering, what we're talking about is the art of properly developing prompts to give you correct or useful results. So it's basically just a narrative. It's teaching the system. So any teacher, and we've seen plenty of examples of that in the news today, with the educational system, what the teachers are telling the students can heavily bias what the way they approach decision making. The same thing is here. So I don't think prompt engineering itself is a bad vector for this kind of biases, but it certainly is the channel for tuning these machines.
Yeah, Nikesh, if I can just take 30 seconds.
Yeah, please.
With Tarun, everything, but in fact, the question asked, prompt engineering is actually opposite of what it is. It is, what is indicated in the question. It's actually meant to, get the right response so that you can ask the right question is important, because you ask the wrong question, you get wrong answer. Doesn't mean the model is bad. The art of questioning is what we're talking about. Prompt engineering is synonymous to art of conversation, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, and to that engine, it's almost like talking to a human, right? You ask a certain question, you get back a certain response. You ask a different kind of question, you get a different response. So it's a little bit like that. So there are some questions around, regulatory bodies have a say in the matter, etc. Right? These ones we will take in the next session. Actually, the next webinar is actually part of trying to answer many of these kind of questions. I think we have time for just one more, so I'll just take another question, which is more to do with how can these technologies, can generative AI be linked to applications like the safety database, or will they exist as two separate individual things? Tarun, I think we've done some experiments, or we're trying to do that. So do you want to throw some light on that?
Yeah, no, definitely linked. So the big win, especially at the enterprise pharma level, is how can we use these large language models with our corporate proprietary data sets, right? And so there are different ways of doing that. If actually those people who are using ChatGPT, if you have the paid version of it, you can have plugins, right? So this idea of being able to integrate the GPT engine with external systems is even there in a kind of convenient way of plugins on the ChatGPT side. If you're able to then use the enterprise tooling that we get, like from Microsoft, you have more sophisticated ways of doing that. And so in our case, for example, we're using GPT to help us write SQL queries against internal databases and execute those SQL queries, get the results back, and then process that data in different ways. And that's using our in-house SQL servers. And that data doesn't go out of our environment. And certainly the GPT engine is not retrained with our proprietary data. I know that's one of the concerns there. So absolutely, this is just another AI model that can be integrated with your enterprise systems like we have been doing for 20 years.
Okay. I think that's sort of brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you. I would really like to thank all my panelists for giving their valuable insights, and thank you, audience. I think you've had some great questions, if there are some questions that we haven't been able to answer, feel free to send us an email to generative.ai@indegene.com, and we'll try and address that. Also look forward to seeing you back on the next webinar, which is going to be on July 20th. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much.